try this a new way. I'm gonna show you the tricks that I know. I'm getting tired of talking, and I need more of a show right now. It's time that you made your mind up, 'cause lately all it ever does is change. Feels like we're only talking, going round and around, back around. I will fight like no other every day. I won't stop like the others. I will stay. 'Cause now is the right time, and I'm feeling alright. I'm playing your game like I know I can win right now. You got me on tonight, 'cause loving you is like I'm walking a tightrope so high. I won't be turning around, no, I won't be turning around. It's the right time, you feeling alright. I'm playing your game like I will win tonight. I think I'll do it on my way. I'm gonna show you what I'm going through, get you out of your comfort zone, 'cause I need more of the truth right now. It's time that you made your mind up, 'cause lately all it ever does is change. Feels like we're only talking, going round and around, back around. I will fight like no other every day. I won't stop like the others. I will stay. 'Cause now is the right time, and I'm feeling alright. I'm playing your game like I know I can win right now. You got me on tonight, 'cause loving you is like I'm walking a tightrope so high. I won't be turning around, no, I won't be turning around. It's the right time, you feeling alright. I'm playing your game like I will win tonight. Don't forget it, don't forget it, don't forget it. We'll turn this around. Don't forget it, don't forget it, don't forget it. We'll turn this around.
Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word Live and to the Styrian Grand Prix race reaction. Do you know, not a bad one. Not as dramatic as last week and all of that, but I still thoroughly enjoyed that one and some great stuff on that final lap as well. Wow. What does Lando Norris take on that final lap? That's crazy. But we'll talk more about that a little bit later. I've got Stuart with me today. I'm going to try and get the guests down to one or two rather than having everybody on, unless it's an epic one, and then we will have to. But yes, I'm just playing with Mike there to make sure the levels are correct. But Stuart will be with me shortly. So we're going to kick things off, spoiler alert, with a look at the race results super quickly. Lewis Hamilton victory. Cruise, a Sunday afternoon cruise for Lewis. Valtteri Bottas in second place. Great scrap with Max Verstappen, who ended up third. Alexander Albon, fourth place. Quite a way off his teammate today, but still fourth place in the bag. That's where, again, like we said about Gasly, that's where he needs to be. Lando Norris in P5. Sergio Perez P6. Lance Stroll 7. No penalty for those asking in chat. That's been confirmed. 8th place for Daniel Ricciardo. 9th for Carlos Sainz and Daniel Kvyat taking that last point for 10th. Kimi Raikkonen 11th in the first Alfa Romeo. The two Haas boys finished the race. That's all they needed today. So 12th and 13th for them. Giovinazzi 14th. Gasly 15th. Russell 16th. Latifi 17th. And your 3 retirements. Not quite as many as last week. So this shouldn't take too long. Ocon, Leclerc and Vettel. Both Ferraris out. We'll get onto those a little bit later in the stream. But let's kick things off. And this is where I probably push the talk off. But I'm going to go double check that I have done that. I'll leave that on screen for a second. And say a very good afternoon to Stuart. Good afternoon, Stuart. I forgot your name. How bad's that?
Wow. Thanks. Good afternoon, Stephen. Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, like I said at the start, it wasn't as crazy as it was last week by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a nice race. And I think if that race had happened last week, I think everyone would be saying, well, it was all right, actually, good way to start the season, a bit of strategy, intrigue and some action through the field. But because it followed last weekend, everyone's going, oh, it's not as good as last week. I don't think anything will top last week, to be honest.
Yeah, last week definitely spoiled us, but this was a good race. There were I think most of the positions, apart from first place, were up for grabs at some point during the race. Nothing was particularly certain, and we saw quite a bit of midfield action and strategy unfolding. And I think we had plenty to keep our eyes on, to be honest.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I mean, you know, Lewis, we'll start with him, same as last week. We'll do top 3 and then we'll talk about Ferrari and everything else as well. But Lewis Hamilton, I mean, his lap in qualifying yesterday, I said in the race look ahead, was absolutely phenomenal. I think Jenson Button said it was one of the best wet laps he'd ever seen, and that's just how good it was. I know Max had his spin, but it was still 1.2 seconds up the road. I think he'd still have been 5 or 6 tenths clear even without Max's spin. So phenomenal on Saturday, and he's turned up today, and it was lights to flag, wasn't it? It really was. He absolutely dominated that race. And I saw it on Twitter. I think it was Ellie on Twitter. She might be in chat saying that basically Lewis Hamilton, he has a bad weekend and then he comes back and that's it. He will just destroy everybody because he wants to bounce back immediately and show, hey, look, I'm still here. But that drive, I'd say faultless. I think there was a moment at turn 3 where there was a lock-up and ran a little bit wide. But if that's the biggest drama he had today, I think that kind of points out just how dominant that performance was. There's really not an awful lot to say, which is really sad because it was a great drive, because it was so dominant.
Yeah, it never ever looked in doubt, did it? There were points when he was running sort of same kind of pace to Verstappen behind him, but you knew he had that all under control and there was more in the tanks if he needed it. And I think Jenson Button agrees with Ellie. He had a look in his eye when being interviewed by Simon Lazenby on Sky. He sort of said the same thing. Lewis knows how to bounce back, and here he is. Still, this doesn't necessarily mean he's going to stomp all over the championship. We don't know what's going to happen from race to race, and how on form Bottas is going to be, because we still haven't seen a sort of consistent Bottas throughout the season. But yeah, you can't really give him driver of the day because it's too obvious. But he was faultless today and yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody's not seen that on board of his lap, I cringe on wet laps anyway. That sounds wrong. When drivers are on their wet laps anyway, because it's quite they're wrestling the car, but that's what we love about Formula One, isn't it? The drivers literally driving on instinct almost. And I think the race wasn't phenomenal today. It was a very good race, but it wasn't phenomenal. But the qualifying yesterday more than makes up for that. I think we've had an incredible 2 weekends in Austria, and I know there was that talk of possibly Hungary. Headlines being blown out of proportion, not going ahead next week and staying in Austria. If they want to stay in Austria for another week, that's absolutely fine, and we can call it the Styrian Grand Prix then. I think the Red Bull Ring absolutely delivered, and somebody said it in chat. I think it was Kirill saying, "Remember when people said those opening races would fit Red Bull?" It's almost the perfect start for Mercedes in many ways. Isn't it? I mean, they won both the races. They would have liked Lewis to have been on the podium last week, I'm sure, but 80 points from 2 races that they were not expected to go well at. I mean, is that it? Constructors Championship wise, it's race 2, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was definitely some merit in the idea that Austria wouldn't be Mercedes's best track and would be the opportunity for other people to step up and take it. But double DNF last week for Red Bull, double DNF this week for Ferrari, 2 wins in a row for Mercedes. Granted, Hamilton had a slightly more clumsy weekend last week, but you know, they've taken the points, almost as many points as they could possibly take when they needed them. So championship wise, the others are really going to have to step up. I don't think we're going to see it from Ferrari, but I think Red Bull are going to have to find something somewhere, and they're going to have to find it outside of running to the stewards every 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'd agree with that one. I mean, Hungary's going to be interesting because it's a track that, again, in theory, Red Bull should be relatively strong at, as we thought at the Red Bull Ring, but I think we're going to fight. I think we're going to fight, but I think this is going to be Hamilton v Bottas for the title, which if Bottas can carry on delivering those second places when Lewis Hamilton is in one of those moods where he's just going to dominate, then I think he is going to keep himself in the fight this year. I mean, he's still top of the championship, 6 points clear. It's not a huge lead, and that could easily turn around again in Hungary if it's another 1-2 Hamilton-Bottas. But there are going to be weekends where Bottas is stronger than Lewis. There'll be weekends where Hamilton makes, believe it or not, mistakes, or there's a strategy error, a pit stop problem, or a reliability problem. And if Bottas can make sure that he keeps himself there, I think we will get... keeps himself there when Hamilton's dominating. At least then when Hamilton has those off weekends and he can win that race, I think we will have a Rosberg-Hamilton kind of championship fight. Maybe not as... Is toxic the right word? Toxic seems a bit harsh. I don't think it was that bad, but I think we could see a really good scrap between those two like we saw in 2016. So I think as amazing as Hamilton's drive was today and all weekend, I think it was a big day for Bottas as well.
Yeah, Bottas drove very well. I think clearly something lacking in comparison to Hamilton in the wet. Hamilton is just one of those drivers who can just find pace on a wet track in ways that we haven't really seen from Bottas. You might correct me there if you remember anything, but similar that actually we have seen from Verstappen. We've seen him just fight. Driving on a wet track is a different experience. It's not just about knowing the track inside out. You're having to learn the track lap by lap, corner by corner, and just kind of have a little bit of instinct of how much grip's in the car every millisecond. And that's something that elevates some drivers over others. And actually something I'd quite like to see F1 return to. If you watch like old 70s, 80s F1 races, you see them twitching all over the place. And that's very much a sort of fighting the car every single lap that we sort of miss these days. But yeah, back to the point you were asking. Yeah, Bottas probably drove as good a race as we could ask from him today. He wasn't going to catch Hamilton, but he took everyone else, including Verstappen, almost easily. Not completely easily. Verstappen gave him a run for his money, but almost easily.
That first overtake attempt by Bottas on Verstappen, I mean, I thought it was done. I think commentary thought it was done, to be fair. I think a lot of people going, oh, well, that's Bottas through. But the way Verstappen fought back, considering he was talking about issues with traction, the rear tyres were going off, to get around the outside of turn 4, where, of course, we've seen incidents this weekend, was, I think, a great move. I think it was a great move, and I'm so glad that he didn't just sort of go, oh, well, P3 will do. At least he's fought for that position and shown some hunger in there. So I think if Red Bull can give Verstappen the car, I think he'll be right in this fight. So that's important that Verstappen keeps that hunger going, if you kind of get what I'm saying. So I would have been really annoyed annoyed again, probably the wrong word, if Verstappen had just gone, oh, well, never mind, it's third today, off you go, Valtteri, but at least he got it round the outside and fourth. I mean, it could have been very messy, of course, as we saw with Albon and Perez, and, of course, Hamilton and Albon last week. Was it Albon? No, sorry, it wasn't Albon. Yes, it was Albon and Perez. What is it with Albon in that corner? Should we call that the Alex Albon corner?
Well, the Hamilton Verstappen thing. I mean, sorry, the Bottas Verstappen thing was looking a bit like it could be a repeat of the Merc Red Bull incident that happened last time. Something about turn 4, isn't it? And you're right, Albon came very close to having a very similar accident as well. But we saw actually through Formula 2 as well, in both races, that if you can keep the momentum around the outside of turn 4, you can run side by side through the next few corners, and it's not guaranteed you're going to keep or lose the place. And it was quite mesmerising to see Verstappen cling on, even though we probably all knew in his heart of hearts that it was a done deal at some point. I'm very glad it didn't come to tears. Very, very glad.
Davy in chat suggesting we call it the Alb off corner.
Yeah.
Go. It's an idea. Max was frustrated, though. There's no doubt he was frustrated on team radio and a little bit frustrated in the post-race interviews because they just didn't have the pace. But that's understandable, isn't it? This guy, a lot of talk about Red Bull being able to challenge Mercedes, and he wants to fight for world championships, and he doesn't want to be trundling around, struggling to keep up. And so you can understand that frustration. But are you disappointed? Is kind of where I'm going with this, Stuart, with Red Bull's pace this weekend, because they did look like the challengers, and this, on paper, should have been a track that suited them very nicely. And although, third place today and fourth place for Albon, 2 DNFs in the first race, they're right on the back foot immediately. I mean, what was that? 27 points they've got in the Constructors versus Mercedes 80, and Verstappen's only got 15 on the board compared to Bottas's 43. It's a big ask, isn't it?
It is a big ask. I'm not too disappointed in their pace. I think they've been pretty close this weekend. I know Albon's a fair set away from Verstappen through the race, and last weekend could have been very different if they didn't have the problems they had. Verstappen retiring, Albon probably would have retired anyway, but he could have had the win had he not got into scrapes with Hamilton. So the points on the table could be very different. Still below Mercedes, but I think they are probably closer than they have been for years to Mercedes, and we're about to head to a track that isn't a power circuit. It doesn't have it doesn't have enough straights to have the 3 DRS zones that we've been having the last 2 races, and we know traditionally Red Bull have been very good in slow to medium corners, very technically proficient rather than sort of pure grunt and power. So we could see different things in the coming races.
Yeah, I should clarify as well. I don't mean a big ask in the championship. I mean, in terms of closing, I should have clarified it, closing the gap to Mercedes, because if they are as dominant as it appears they could be this weekend, then there's a lot of work to do at Red Bull. And Jamie was saying in chat there that the Red Bull car is a good car. It's just that Mercedes are a hell of a lot better. They're kind of in a league of their own up top. But I hope Max and Red Bull and Alex Albon as well can get their act together and try and catch Mercedes and give us a fight this year. But it's a very strong start for Merc. Great drive on Saturday from Lewis and again today. And like I said earlier, Valtteri Bottas doing what he's got to do on those weekends where Hamilton is in control. And it was complete control. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. He just, like I say, ran wide at turn 3 is the biggest highlight, if you like, of his race, the most dramatic moment, which, given last week, I'm sure he'll take. But yeah, Alex Albon, got to talk about Alex Albon. I think P4 is a good result for him. Just while we're on Red Bull, we'll get to Ferrari, don't worry. But a long way off Max Verstappen in terms of pace. Now, I know that's Max Verstappen, and that's a hell of a teammate to try and match in terms of pace anyway, isn't it? But I think a bit concerning that at times Verstappen pitted, didn't he, a second time? So that 11 seconds, you can stick 25 on top of there. So 36 seconds behind your teammate. And I'm going to give him, I'll cut him some slack initially this season, as I often do with drivers. I like to give it a good 7 races. Although 7 races could be most of this season, to be fair, the way things are going. But cut him some slack initially. But if that was Gasly, people would be absolutely tearing him a new one. So I hope Albon can pick up the pace as the season goes on. But I was, again, a little bit disappointed to see he was so far off Verstappen, but then maybe I'm being harsh. Chat will tell me, and you will as well, Stuart, because at the end of the day, it's Max Verstappen he's up against, and it's not like he's fighting a driver who isn't star quality, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, we can't forget that. And Max Verstappen is a hell of a benchmark. And part of the reason that I think his previous teammates have ended up, hitting their heads against a brick wall and feeling the wrath of the team. I haven't heard a debrief yet from Albon, but I think he'll be disappointed. And I think there probably might be some reasons. Maybe he wasn't as comfortable as Verstappen was, but then Verstappen himself wasn't that comfortable. And it's probably more likely if the car, isn't underneath them, that Verstappen's going to find something that Albon doesn't, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I think, and especially like if we look back to Vettel last week and how much he was trying to fight his car that just seemed to be crashing into every corner and just resting under control. I think the higher skilled, more experienced driver will find a way to get some speed out of an ailing car than someone like Albon. But, I think Albon will be looking to do better than this. And I'm definitely interested to see how he does race to race. As we saw the back half of last season, he has got a lot of speed. Actually, we saw it last weekend as well. Granted, we saw the most of it when he was sort of on different strategy to the Mercedes ahead, but he's got it in him. He needs to. He hasn't really slammed his foot down yet. He hasn't really shown himself to be someone to be worried about yet, rather than someone to back up Max Verstappen, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's done better than Gasly. Sorry, Pierre fans. I think he's done better than Gasly did at Red Bull. But the big problem today is because he was so far off the pace of Verstappen, it compromised Red Bull's strategy because they couldn't. They had to preempt a Mercedes undercut from Bottas that actually never came because they preempted it, of course. They've kind of countered that. If Albon had been fourth and sort of within a couple of seconds of Bottas, they could have pitted Albon, which would have brought Bottas in earlier, which could have ultimately meant that Verstappen could have ended up second today. So they need a second driver who is there to do that number two job. I'm not trying to put Albon down as a number two driver, but unfortunately that is what he is at Red Bull. So they need him to be on the pace so that they can pull the trigger, so they can take control of strategy. Because if Mercedes are that dominant in terms of pace, possibly the only way teams like Red Bull are going to be able to beat them is on strategy. So they need Albon right there. And that was the big criticism of Gasly, wasn't it, from Christian Horner and Helmut Marko, was he just wasn't quick enough and it was compromising them in races. And I think last season, had Gasly got up to speed a bit quicker or at all, with the greatest of respect to him, Red Bull would have been a lot better off in the constructors, possibly fighting Ferrari for second. So that's ultimately what cost Red Bull today, I think, is not having that option on strategy. But I was going to say it's only race 2 of the season, but it is his 11th in that Red Bull now, and Gasly got 12. So, I mean, it's kind of difficult as well to judge drivers on one racetrack. It's 2 races. It's one racetrack, isn't it? So we'll see how he gets on in Hungary. Then it's 2 at Silverstone, and then Spain, I want to say.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all very confusing this year, isn't it?
I'm with you in Spain, to my memory, which I wouldn't trust. Luckily, we don't have to worry about it because we can't go.
No, that's true. But yeah, they allow fans and we end up in Germany and it's like, oh, Spain, damn. Yeah, that's just my point on Albon. I think strategy-wise, he should have been there. But Ferrari, Stewart, it was a cracking weekend for them, wasn't it? They had a great time. Look, we heard things were bad over the winter, and last week they were really far off the pace. Yes, lucky, but great result for Leclerc. I think his drive really slid under the radar. I said it in the preview last weekend. So second place, great recovery, really poor qualifying. Leclerc gets a penalty as well for impeding. And then just as you need as a team, your 2 drivers to work together when the car isn't quick and pick up the points and try and get the best result possible, they crash into each other. I mean, that is so... It's rule number 1, isn't it? It's a cliche, but it's rule number 1. Do not take out your teammate. But rule number 1, do not take out your teammate, especially if your car's a little bit rubbish and you need every single point you can get. It's like a million times worse. And if you want my view on that, I thought it at the time. It was ambitious by Leclerc. The gap is there, but to quote Martin Brundle in commentary, because he's spot on, that's a gap that's always going to disappear. I think that was a little bit, what's the word? A little bit ambitious, if we're being generous, from Leclerc, but also a little bit stupid, especially with your teammate in there when that gap's going to disappear. First lap, cliche again, you're not going to win the race on the first lap, you can only lose it. And yes, Leclerc's come out and accepted full responsibility. He does that. He's like, I am so stupid. I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. That's fine. I like that. However, if Vettel had done that to Leclerc, people would be absolutely ready to lynch him for that. That was not a clever move from Leclerc. It was scruffy. I'm trying to be nice with ambitious, but I think he deserves every single bit of criticism. And I think he's quite lucky, maybe because it was the first lap, that there wasn't some kind of investigation, or maybe even because they're teammates. Because if that had been Norris on Vettel or Kvyat on Magnussen, that could have ended up with a penalty. I think 100% on Leclerc, that one. And I know it's not going down very well with some people, but I think he's accepted blame, and I think he's right to do so, but I think he should still rightly be criticised for it.
Yeah, I agree. Fault definitely lays with Leclerc there. There was an investigation, I think, by the stewards, and they said no further action necessary. But by that
Okay.
point, both cars had retired anyway. So, what were they going to do? I think if I was going to give Leclerc any benefit of the doubt, I would just say that lap one, and that's being in the middle of the pack and having so many cars around you, that corner's always a bit of a squeeze. And I'm definitely not defending him particularly, because it's definitely his fault, and he went for a gap that was never on, really. I think there's just that mentality in your head when making those split-second decisions of like, if I ease off, how many people are going to go around the outside of me? Because they were three wide, there were cars all around them, and I wonder if there's that moment of panic when you're like, I need to be amongst this. I can't back off too much. And yeah, it was very, very silly. And once again, just Vettel came off worst off. Like, how many races in the last year and a half have we seen Vettel spun around in the wars, bumping into someone and ending up at the back of the pack? I don't know how he must be feeling right now. At least this time, it wasn't him being overambitious.
Yeah, he seems to be involved in it. He makes mistakes and ends up in a spin, but then there are other times when other people make mistakes and he still seems to end up in a spin. It's not. Yeah. I feel for the guy, I really do, and he's leaving that team. I mean, assuming he sees out the season, he's pretty adamant that he will, because he's a professional. But we'll see if that all gets a bit toxic. But I just think. Do you think there's a level of, and I think I do feel this, that there's a level of overdriving from Leclerc and Vettel because the car's so poor? They've got to push that little bit harder. They've got to take that extra chance, and that's why Vettel slung it up the inside of Sainz and it all went wrong last weekend, and why Leclerc's had to be a little bit more ambitious into turn 3 at the start. I know you've got to be careful on the first lap, because again, cliche, you can't win the race on the first lap, you can only lose it. So do you think there's that element where the drivers are going, look, this car is slow, I've got to go a little bit later on the brake, there's a gap there, I've got to try for it?
Yeah, definitely 100%. And Leclerc's mindset, he's in a Ferrari, he didn't make it into Q3, he then got a penalty which dropped him to 14th, I want to say. And while it is true you can't win a race on the first lap, you can only lose it, there is also the truth in the fact that that's your easiest lap to make up positions.
Yeah.
Because after that lap, everything settles into the train, and every place you make up then is infinitely harder. So trying to get yourself into a good position from which to run your race from is quite key. And I think both of them are just, I want to say, desperate seems a strong word, but they're just they are. It's not coming to them as easily as it would be for like the Red Bulls or Mercedes, who can, or even like teams like the Racing Points and the McLarens, who are like have a good position to work with and kind of working towards a target they feel happy with. But Ferrari are like way behind their own personal targets, and clearly trying too hard. I wonder what the atmosphere is behind the scenes. Like, I wonder if they're being fed this desperation from the rest of the team, from management, from Maranello.
Maybe. I mean, all I do know for sure is they cancelled their press briefing, didn't they, after the race today? That's what they have done. So,
I don't have many laps to talk about, I guess, to be honest.
True. Kind of pointless, isn't it? What happened? They collided. What do you want me to say? But I can't. I was thinking today, possibly 2014. That was pretty poor. But I'm trying to think of the last time I felt this pessimistic or downbeat about Ferrari's car. I know we've had a couple of years where it's not been great, but they've always had the pace to be challenging as a top 3 team and second in the constructors and picking up podiums and challenging for wins at power tracks. Let's not open that can of worms. But I'm trying to think back to the last time it was this bad. I know 2014 was pretty shocking, but I've really put everybody on the spot there trying to think off the top of our head. But yeah, I'm worried about them this season. I really am. Do you think, actually, great point, was it Crofty or was it Martin in commentary who said that, sort of brought the question of, were they blindsided last year because they had the powerful engine, so they thought they had a good chassis? And obviously now they've not got that advantage anymore with the power unit. Actually, they don't have a good chassis.
Yeah, I mean, that could well be the case, which is kind of the opposite of the McLaren Honda situation. If you sort of remember that, when McLaren thought they had a really good chassis and it was just Honda that letting them down. And then they switched to Renault and they're like, oh yeah, we still have got a bad chassis. It turns out it was us all along. Yeah, I think the relationship between the chassis and the engine is a complicated one to unpick. And God, I'm not a data guy, and I'm sure they work really hard at trying to unpick which parts of the car are working well. But certainly, if you do have the raw grunt, it is going to flatter parts of the car that aren't necessarily there. But looking down the field at the Ferrari cars, especially through the speed traps, their pace has dropped off rapidly since last year, or even since they made that mysterious change at the end of last year.
Sam, David, Justin, and Lucas, among others, all suggesting 2009 possibly. Wasn't a great car 2009, was it? Initially.
Yeah, that was the year that the big teams kind of fell off the radar while we had this sort of Brawn Red Bull thing happening at the top. And 2004 was a bit duff for them as well, wasn't it?
5.
But certainly this decade.
2005.
2005.
Yeah.
But it's a rare event. Oh yeah, 2004 was great for them. What am I talking about?
Just thinking, I seem to recall that being rather good as a Schumacher fan, but okay. I really worried about them this season, and they had the updates on today. I think that's their biggest frustration as well, is that they didn't get to run these updates in the race for a full race, see what it could do over 71 laps versus last week, because it's the same track, of course, but they've got
it was a new floor as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, new floor,
of all things, which Leclerc minced into the ground.
That there's a great picture, isn't there? Just, I think it's on. I saw it on Autosport just before we went live, and all I could see was the floor hanging there on the ground, and then you've got, all I can hear on team radio is in my head is a team radio of we see floor damage. It's like, you think it's dragging along the ground? It's wow. I mean, yeah. I hope I said it yesterday. I hope for their sake the upgrades, the full package that comes in Hungary, can make a difference, but it seems like it's the power unit rather than the chassis itself, perhaps. But I don't know. Really, I suppose sticking to this race, that's kind of the point of a race reaction. But for me, Leclerc, first lap, I understand why he went for it, but I think he needed to be more careful and deserves that criticism, and the blame is with him. Really, I can't. I don't think I've seen anyone blaming Seb, but I don't know how they could. He's kind of there, getting on with it, cars all over, and all of a sudden, whack, teammate into the side of him, into the back of him. So, yeah, disappointing. Do you think, I'll throw it there very quickly to chat, and I'll throw it to you as well, Stuart, before we move on. Do you think Seb will see the season out with Ferrari? He's exhaled near 3 team bosses this weekend, so, he could have a seat somewhere else.
Yeah, I think he's deliberately stoking some of the gossip. Maybe to raise his value and to sort of his market value. I think he will. I think I don't think he's someone to give up. I think I, I'm not. Sorry, I struggle to get my head into Vettel's head because
Yeah.
he is quite a private person. I know he's having a frustrating time. I'll be very interested to see what his interview with Martin Brundle is this week that he asked for. He said you can talk, you can ask me anything you like. Um, I think he just likes going racing, and I think the fact that he said that money isn't an option, whether it was a contract with Ferrari or not, speaks to that. Uh, I think, to be honest, there is a touch of the Kimi Raikkonens with him. I think he just likes going racing. I don't think he likes much of the other faff around it, and I think he just wants to get the best out of his weekend. And I could tell he's frustrated when he doesn't. But I don't know where else he would go, and I don't think he'd want to sit on the sidelines, to be honest.
See Tyler Anderson in chat there. That's the point I always go back to. He's a professional. So I think unless Ferrari turn around and say, get out, I think he'll stay. I think he's just too professional for that. And interesting talk about him going to Haas. We'll maybe do this on another stream or another video another time and speculate on this a bit, but talk that Gunther Steiner's like, well, if he's willing to take a pay cut and he's happy to come back down the field, Haas could be an option for him. So maybe if he has got that keenness that Kimi Raikkonen has to drive, then maybe he'll go to Haas. But I think it's Mercedes, Aston Martin, or at least a year off, I think, for Seb at the end of this year. But we'll not get into that one. Lando Norris. What is it with him and last laps? I mean, was he P7 at the start of that final lap and he ends up P5 or P8 or something, P8 to P5, something like that? Obviously, the contact between Perez and Albon, which I suppose we probably ought to mention first before Norris, was that just one of those things, do you think? Perez a little bit overambitious, maybe Albon, who's already said he wouldn't do anything different in that Hamilton incident, keeping his wheel in there, because that could have ended in another crash. That could have been the same result as last week, because he did get almost went a bit sideways, didn't he, Alex?
Yeah, it was very close. And I mean, good on him for doing the same thing that he did last week, just as he said. To be honest, I think that turn 4 is a great corner. Downhill, high speed, like kind of a crucial breaking point. You can go around the outside, but it is a risk, but it does set you up nicely for the next set of corners. I love that Alex did that again. I'm glad it didn't end in tears. Yeah, just a silly little racing incident. Big shame it sort of had consequences for Perez, who had a great race up until then, but I guess we'll get onto that in a bit. But yeah, racing incident, good hard racing.
Yeah, disappointing for Perez, wasn't it? Perez. Yeah. I think what's different between that and Lewis Hamilton and Alex Albon last week is, first of all, it's Perez and Albon. It's the obvious difference in that incident. But I think as well, because it's not totally destroyed one race, I think that's probably why that's not really been looked at as anything other than a racing incident. I think if Albon had gone round, there might have been something, or if Perez had ended up in the gravel, maybe there would have been something. But that's kind of I don't want to get back into it, but what we discussed last week, wasn't it? That fine balance between maybe it was the fact that Albon came off worse in that the penalty was given to Hamilton. If that had just been a bit of a tag and Albon had kept going, maybe not. But I don't know. It's a difficult one. Perez went for it. I was surprised he didn't actually just cruise up to the back of Albon and get past him, because he had some phenomenal pace, didn't he, up to that point? And that racing point, definitely. I get the feeling that's the third best car at the minute, if I'm being honest, just with their race pace today. If we'd have had dry quali yesterday and they'd have been 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th on the grid, I think they would have been possibly where the Red Bulls were. Certainly where Albon was. Yeah,
I'd love to see them have a normal weekend without worries, where everything lines up. That, I think you're right. I think, 3rd place is roughly where they are. It was really enjoyable watching them racing today, the pair of them, taking their tracing point a little bit too seriously with copying the Hamilton move. But I'm glad to see this team back where they were, because they're a good bunch of people, and I hope the Aston stuff does them well. We saw the dip off last year after the whole Timo switcheroo thing, but coming up from the Force India years, just slowly improving year on year and having some solid fourths until last year, and then now seeing them back up there in that position it's pretty cool to see, even with that rubbish name that I still can't connect with it all. And
You don't want
Perez
that on the
again,
World
like
Championship trophy, do you? That
no, not
name.
really. No, Aston Martin would look good though.
Oh yeah.
And you know what? I am glad that Perez has spent the last few years making damn sure that he's not forgotten in the midfield.
Yeah, well, they picked up on that in commentary, didn't they? That move to McLaren was too early for him. Where would he be? I like Perez. I think I think he's so underrated. But that incident cost him big. Could have probably got at least probably would have been P5, wouldn't he? Norris got him penultimate corner or into that final corner anyway, and then on the line was it a tenth of a second between Perez, Stroll, and Ricciardo. It was about that, wasn't it? A tenth and a half between 3 cars over the line. Oh, absolutely brilliant. That was dramatic. Final laps in Austria. But I think somebody said it in chat a moment ago, we've got to give credit to Daniel Ricciardo for keeping Stroll behind for so long, because Stroll cruised up to the back of him, and then Daniel Ricciardo kind of worked out where he was strong and where he wasn't strong, and he kind of figured out that the exit of turn 3 was probably the most critical part of the lap, and he was using all of his battery and everything he could to keep Stroll at bay, and I think he did a great job. In the end, he ended up behind Stroll, but we'll talk about that in just a second. But I think overall, fantastic job from Danny Rick to keep him behind for so long, because I think with respect to Lance, I think if Perez had been in that position, that move would have been done a lot earlier. Personal feeling.
I think you're probably right. But Ricciardo is a canny racer. He's really good at the wheel-to-wheel stuff and making judgments. Really fine judgments, actually. But it was a really good race from Stroll. Maybe his sort of wheel-to-wheel, judging the braking points and getting the overtaking done could be refined. I mean, Daniel Ricciardo sets a high bar for that, but I thought he drove a really great race. And you're absolutely right, though. Daniel Ricciardo defended beautifully for as long as he could, and actually, kind of only he lost out quite big for was it? It was Norris getting involved in the end, wasn't it? That hang on, I'm trying to find my mind. So much happened in that sort of third sector.
Yeah,
Daniel
Norris
Ricciardo
was closing in.
Daniel Ricciardo lost 2 positions in one go. It was Perez that got them both, wasn't it? Ricciardo was holding off Stroll, and then sort of Perez got involved, and Ricciardo lost 2 places at once, didn't he?
No, I think Perez was gone, wasn't he? I think it was Stroll, Ricciardo, Stroll, Norris, and then Stroll. I mean, wow. That's why I was giggling. Just threw it up the inside in a hope that they didn't collide massively. Took the position, and that allowed Norris to go past both of them. Because
that's right, Norris got, yes. Whew. There's a lot going on. My brain can't store it all.
What do you make of that move by Stroll? Stewards had a look at it, they investigated it and said no action, no further action, racing incident. It was I'm gonna steal another phrase from commentators and pundits now. It was right on the edge, wasn't it? It was right on the limit of what's acceptable. And if that move is made at turn 4 and there's gravel on the outside, that's a penalty. But because the runoff's there, it's probably safe, Stroll, because that was super aggressive, very late, and it was, he is forcing Ricciardo off the track at that point. Like I say, though, I think with the tarmac there, the stewards have probably gone, oh, well, he could carry on. I don't know. I'd love to be in the stewards' room for a decision like that.
Oh, God, it would be amazing, wouldn't it? It is. I think you're right, and I think that's the basic summary of it. It is interesting, and also, looking to the Perez Albon incident, that I'm thinking back to something you said last week in that about the steward decisions being about the act, not the consequence, but not necessarily being the case.
Yeah.
In that, Perez and Albon, very similar to what happened with Hamilton and Albon. Perez and Stroll and Ricciardo being right on the limit of what would be acceptable, and maybe might have been a whole different ball game if there was gravel on there. But I guess maybe you make different decisions about how hard you can push the car on the outside depending on what's on the apron of the track, and should that matter? Because as Ricciardo could carry on, maybe you can push a bit harder. I don't know. That's a hard thing to judge. And another one of those kind of grey areas in the loophole, grey areas in the rules that sort of like that I feel tricky. I find grey areas are quite interesting because it allows you to be flexible in how you steward the race and how you kind of allow people to do things that depending on circumstance. But also you can go into a race not entirely knowing what's punishable and what's not, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we don't need grey areas within loopholes in Formula One. It's all very complicated enough. I don't like that well, no. I suppose to a point, there's got to be the track has got to be taken, the circuit's got to be taken into account when you're making these decisions. It's a tricky one. I think perhaps unpopular opinion, but I think Max's move on Leclerc last year was fine, right on the limit. And I'd probably say Stroll, I'd probably have let that go as well if I was a steward, but then I'm just a fan and I get very wrapped up in stuff like that, and I love seeing drivers having a go when the move is on, and I think the move was on. To be fair to Stroll, it was late, but I think the move was on, unlike Leclerc on the first lap, where I think that was just a crazy first lap move. But yeah, it's borderline. Tell us what you think, chat. Penalty or no penalty for Lance Stroll if you were in the steward's room? I'd probably just let that go, but it would have been one of those... I'd have taken longer to come to that decision than they would have done. There's no doubt about that. But very opportunistic from Lando Norris to sneak in and nick that position and then pit Perez in the... I'm sure it was a final corner to take 5th place and stay 3rd in the Drivers' Championship. Who had that after 2 races? Norris 3rd in the championship with a podium.
What a season opener he's had, hasn't he? I mean, incredible move, just keeping his eye on those racing points, and God, the way he positioned himself going through those corners to make sure he was there and able to take not one but both positions. They squabbled with each other. It was very impressive, and then holding it all together. He must he must be on cloud 9 right now. Can't wait to go to Hungary where he makes some kind of catastrophic error and and falls off it again, as tends to happen in Formula One. But yeah, incredible. Norris 3rd, McLaren 2nd. Who'd have seen that a few years ago?
I love the fact that Annette, the Danny Rick fan, is so adamant that it's a penalty. She's donated $2. Penalty!
Wow.
She says absolutely 100% for real mix in the chat. I'll read a couple out super quickly because I want to move on to the next thing. D-Max says penalty, 5 seconds. Brad says penalty. Erminator says no penalty. Interista says great lunge, in my opinion. Penalty for Magic Jack. Scroll down a bit further. Dragon says no penalty. Kieran, borderline, but no penalty. Penalty, no penalty. I think it's split. Black Hawk says penalty, 10 seconds. Penalty if he took Norris out. Are you a Norris fan, William? Mitch, leave it to VAR. Agree. Because within the rules... Dry Bones, says Astro Stevo. Leaving the track and gaining an advantage, says Class. I don't know if that's a different conversation. Ricardo deserves to be ahead and no penalty for Botmon. One more. No penalty needed, says Brian. So, and really mixed. A few others in chat as well. Mario, no penalty. And then Mirko says penalty. So, I suppose in the sense that the old, Sean's biased, not biased thing. I think if we've got such a split of opinions, maybe the stewards are right. Maybe it was a racing incident because... You know, if you're in my case, if you're accused of bias and then the next video you're accused of not being biased or being a fanboy of another driver, then you're doing something right. And maybe in this situation, try to bring it round to me somehow. But in this situation, if so many people are saying penalty and others are saying no penalty and it's kind of very split, maybe the stewards did make the right call. You won't hear me saying that very often. I think that's the second Sunday in a row I've agreed with the stewards. I think I'm ill.
You've turned. Clearly being paid is what's happened.
Yeah.
I would say I like, in general, I prefer to err towards letting people race, which we've been moving towards in the last few years. There was a time when it seemed like every minor infraction, every bit of bumping up against each other seemed to get some kind of either penalty or reprimand or something. And then I think we've kind of backed away from that a bit now, which is nice. I think as you were saying last race, or was it last year, the Verstappen move where it's sort of wheel to wheel bumping, maybe, a toe over the limit, but just enough to allow people to race without causing massive devastation is kind of, I think I'm okay with that. But you're right, it's on the line, and clearly from the chat, it's debatable.
I think if it's on the line, that's fine because that's legal, isn't it? If it's just over the line, then not.
Yeah.
But it's one of those. It's a little bit like the Hamilton one last week. It could have gone either way, couldn't it? So, yeah. Okay, we'll leave it at that. I don't want to bang on about Stroll. I think that covers me for my check payment from Lawrence this week, so that's good. We've talked about him enough. Who else? What was it? Yeah, Norris opportunistic in that fight, in that move into that final corner. We've talked about him. Perez, Stroll, Ricciardo. Actually, just a couple of team orders incidents, if we want to call them that. 3, in fact. Renault, they order Ocon out of the way? No, I don't think they did they? So it was only 2. So Ocon and Ricciardo, that was silly. I think at that point of the race, when you're a midfield team, they should have been telling Ocon just to move over and let Ricciardo go on the better strategy. He was clearly quicker, so I think that was a little bit silly and could have ended up in contact. But, you know, Esteban likes to get his elbows out, and so does Danny Rick. And we didn't hear any complaining, did we? Apart from to say it was quicker by Ricciardo over team radio. So I think kudos to him for that, because at least they were racing kudos. How 90s. Yeah, I think credit there for Ricciardo for not complaining about it. But I think if I was Cyril, I'd have been on the radio saying, come on, Esteban, let him go for now, and we'll see where we're at the end of the race, because he was quicker. McLaren, absolutely the right call, as it turns out, to swap Norris and Sainz. I think we can agree with that one. Unless you don't, Stuart. I'm just putting words in your mouth. Stuart agrees with everything I say.
No, you're right. No, I do agree with you. A bit of a shame for Sainz that things didn't work out as well for him as his qualifying performance might have suggested, but I think it's good to have some points on the board. Yeah, Norris just disappeared, didn't he, up the road? He was on the better strategy that way round. As they were saying in their commentary on Sky, it's like, they might switch them back if he doesn't get on with it, but I don't think they will.
It's like we said about Ferrari sort of back at the start. You've got teams like McLaren and Renault know that they need their drivers working together for the team, because that's the only way they're going to stand any chance of catching the top 3, even though it's not realistic at the moment. But although I think that third place, unless Ferrari improve dramatically, is wide open at the minute between 1, 2, 3. If you throw Ferrari in there with improvements, 4 teams. So we could have Mercedes, Red Bull, sounds thrilling, doesn't it? And then the rest all fighting for third place. So I'm quite looking forward to that. But I think team orders make sense. The other one was Alfa Romeo, Kimi Räikkönen, Antonio Giovinazzi. Not an awful lot to say on that, if I'm being honest, because, again, it made perfect sense. Räikkönen was quicker. Giovinazzi let him go. He was instructed to. He did what he needs to do for the team. So and it put Räikkönen in a good position with P11, didn't it? Because if you then have, let's say, Perez and Albon had a bigger accident than they did, that puts Raikkonen P9, and it's 2 points. So it made sense. I think Alfa made the right call as well there, definitely. But we didn't see an awful lot of Alfa Romeo today, which is a little bit frustrating. But never mind. I think for some reason, Kimi, we never seem to see him.
And we didn't last weekend either, did we? They've sort of become visible ever since. They weren't in Drive to Survive either. Clearly, F1 doesn't like them anymore.
I'm going to throw him a stat in now, Stuart. I'm sorry, I've got to say it. I have more words in Drive to Survive than Kimi Räikkönen does.
Which is a hell of a fact. Oh, God. Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. But yeah, they were strangely invisible. I think Alfa and Haas in particular they were fighting with each other, which was a bit confusing because it turns out, at least from the sort of mid-shot cameras, they do look pretty similar to each other. But they were there. They were on track occasionally. And to your larger point, I think you're absolutely right about team orders and making the right call. And it's particularly why I think Renault made that big mistake, because that third place is up for grabs. And Renault were having a good weekend, and they might not have a good weekend in Hungary or at Silverstone, because we know what they were like last year. You've got to seize your opportunity and be smart about these things, even if it is, quote marks, racing.
Sandro says, Kimi had that one racing moment with K-Mag that was shown on screen in turn 9. That's right, yes. That's all I can recall seeing. So, yeah, I mean, Alfa are kind of one of those teams, a bit like Haas, aren't they, where they they're probably not quick enough without a little bit of chaos to pick up many points, maybe the odd point here and there, but they're also not slow enough to be trundling around at the back. So they're kind of in this really awkward no man's land, which is possibly why we don't see an awful lot of them. But yeah, I think smart move from Alpha, smart move from McLaren as well. And I think Renault should have probably done the same. But then, as we've said a couple of times, Stewart let them race. So probably contradicting myself there a little bit. Alpha Tauri, disappointed with Pierre today. I'm not going to lie. He was so good yesterday. I think a few people, we were talking about Hamilton's lap, rightly so. We're talking about Verstappen and Carlos Sainz getting P3 and some great results. But Pierre Gasly yesterday was consistently challenging sort of 4th, 5th place until the latter stages. Didn't quite have the pace to take a better qualifying slot. So I was really hoping he'd have a good race today. But down in 15th place, Kvyat getting the point for AlphaTauri in 10th. But I expected more from Pierre today, but ultimately, as a team, they're probably quite happy with a point today.
Well, I can't figure out why they stuck him on the hard tyre.
No.
Maybe they think, well, they stuck Kvyat on as well, I think. But, I mean, it clearly wasn't working for Gasly because they got him back on the soft again. But he spent a strange stint on the hard tyre doing absolutely nothing and undoing, the hard work from the rest of his weekend. When actually his first stint was okay. He did get a bit barged by Ricciardo, I want to say, at one point. But yeah, he kind of ended up in no man's land. But I think he could have had a lot better race had he not been stuck on this sort of weird strategy that no one else went for.
Yeah, I saw your tweet on the weird strategy, and I didn't really twig, and I thought, yeah, that is odd, because the mediums should have gone to the end when he pitted. He pitted on lap 24, and Verstappen, apart from obviously his quick stop at the end for the going fastest lap, he would have got to the end on the mediums as well. So, but I suppose the other thing is that it's okay to say Verstappen could have got to the end on the mediums. He's not in a huge amount of traffic, is he, like Gasly is, so maybe he couldn't have got to the end on the mediums. Obviously, he seems to have more data than we do, but when he put the hards on, I just assumed that was hards to the end. It's really odd when you think about it. Why would you come in and put the softs on?
And I was assuming at the time they expected it to go to the end, but maybe we didn't hear a lot from Gasly. We didn't see a lot from Gasly. Maybe Gasly was just like this, or they were looking at the times and like, this isn't working. It did work for Kvyat, who also switched to the hards. But I mean, I don't know why Kvyat switched to the hards, because he started on the mediums, and we basically see every other team, apart from those that were going for fastest lap, do a one-stop stint with soft and medium one way around or the other. So very just weird, weird things happening at Alpha Tauri this week.
Alpha Tauri?
It's still not in there yet.
Crofty did a few of those in commentary today. It was like Alpha Tauri, Alpha Tauri. But yeah, Gasly did 24 laps on the softs and then 25 laps on the hards, and then ran lap 49 to lap 70 on the softs. And Kvyat did 36 on the mediums, and then the rest of the race on the hards. So the softs would have easy. I mean, look, I'm sat here looking at charts, and that's absolutely fine. But the team have far more information. It might just be that they thought that the hard was the better tyre to go on, but they obviously did. Otherwise, why would you put it on? But yeah, odd one. I don't want to get bogged down on Alpha Tauri. I'll talk about Haas in a second. George Russell and Nicholas Latifi. Latifi P17, Russell 16th. Frustrating to see Russell down in 16th. I expected him to go backwards, I'm not going to lie, Stuart. After qualifying, yes, I think most people did. P11 he started, of course, 12th he qualified, but obviously running off at turn 5 on that early lap. I can't remember who was battling. It's just gone completely from my mind. I want to say Magnussen, yeah. Straight on at turn 5. He's acknowledged that on Twitter, said he went for the move, didn't work, and lost the car and went straight on. So that kind of cost him everything. But he was really racy early on, wasn't he? He was having a proper good go at those racing points and a couple of those cars around him. So it's good to see that he's confident enough to do that in that car, but very disappointing, because I think I don't like gambling, but I did put a 5 on him scoring points today. So now I can't have any cake tonight. I should be punished for spending a 5 on that.
Well, everything is a cake now. So, I think it's clear, like watching the race unfold as a whole, that Williams perhaps are still a significant enough way behind the other teams that they're not going to challenge them on track. I think they're much closer, and maybe on a different track they might be they might be able to sort of get amongst it. So I think Russell in the midfield, or having the opportunity to start in the midfield, go for every opportunity you've got. Just send it down the inside of a Haas. Why not? Because you're not going to have an opportunity to do that a second time in the race. Shame it didn't work, but I think whether he'd gone off there or not, he probably still would have ended up 16th. So good for him for trying. And to be honest, he's got to get the overtaking and race to race, wheel to wheel practice in, because there's only one other car on track that's sort of the same pace as him at the moment.
Yeah, I like seeing it. I think agree. He's got to try everything, hasn't he? It's his one opportunity to enjoy a bit of racing before he goes to the back and Trundle. I mean, Williams are much better this year than they were last year. I mean, I keep saying it, couldn't have been any worse, but would have been nice for points, for cake, money, and for Williams and for George, obviously, as well. Haas, I said at the start, I think the most important thing for them today was to kind of make sure they had a car with brakes that could get to the end compared to sort of versus last week, and they did. Magnussen was quite racy today, which was good to see. So there's, again, like the Russell thing, at least they've got some confidence in the car to a point where they can have a go. So I'm kind of, it sounds weird to say, but I think that Haas will be probably quite happy with 12th and 13th place. They beat an Alpha, a different Alpha, and then two Williamses. So I think, or two Williams. Williams.
I would say Williams.
Yeah, there you go. Two Williams. So I think that's a decent result. Obviously, Grosjean got the penalty, started from the pit lane. Bless him. Probably a good thing with chaos that can happen in turn 1. So yeah, I think there's not much to say on Haas, is there? But not a great 2 race weekends for them. Obviously, the brakes were pretty poor. It would have been nice to see them get points, but I think, like I say, getting to the finish today was priority for them, definitely.
I think what I would say about Haas is, yeah, they're not very fast. They're sort of, them and Alfa Romeo are sort of around the same place in the kind of just outside of the midfield. But I think they are consistent now. I don't think they have a car that's like, I don't understand why this car's doing what it is. I don't understand why we're like 5th in qualifying and 18th in the race. I think they are sort of consistently slow, but I think that's an easier thing to understand and build on than a car that is just behaving in a way you can't get a handle on, which is where they were last year.
I agree, and it's weird saying that, isn't it? Being consistently slow is a step forward. It seems really odd, but I get the point. It was weird last year, wasn't it? They couldn't quite get on top of that. I do just need to say, I completely forgot until I just saw a picture on screen of Checo Perez. Great move around the outside of turn 5. I can't remember who it was on now. It's gone out of my head. Again, names. Come on, chat. Who was it around there? It was a stunning move, and he got on the radio, didn't it? It was like, did you like that one? It was like, yes, Checo, we did like that one. That was fantastic. Great move down the outside. We saw a lot of that. I think that you've kind of touched on it, Stuart, that sequence of corners. You've got the DRS turn 3 to turn 4. Somebody goes defensive, you can get around the outside, and then you can stay side by side. It was on Carlos Sainz, apparently. You can stay side by side, and then you've got that fight through turn 5 and 6. I loved that from Checo, and I loved that from lots of cars over the last 2 weekends, just seeing them going wheel to wheel. And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but you can almost tell that these drivers have been desperate to go racing for 7 months because they are taking those extra risks, which in some ways have paid off and in others, of course, haven't. But yeah, I think for 2 weekends of racing, 2 very different races, but 2 good races. I mean, I think today was very good. Last week was insane. But yeah, I think it's a good start to the season, and maybe, I don't want to wait 7 months again, but maybe we should start in Austria every year. I'd be up for that.
It is a very fun track. I was really glad when it came back. Maybe 6 years ago now, but it was we did take a 10-year break, I think, from F1. It's a funny one, isn't it? It's only got 10 turns. It's very short. If we hadn't kept curtailing the speed of the cars, we'd be doing sub 1 minute laps. It's got wild elevation changes, which have a real effect on sort of uh, the braking zones. It's not just sort of a flat track with a hairpin; it's a hairpin up, up a hill. Um, and it has got that amazing sequence at the end after turn 4 where you can go side by side, and it's got the gravel on the edge of it. It's got grass. It's sort of, it seems it's an old track, but it suits these cars really well, which is great to see. I know we're going to Hungary next, which we're probably, unless it rains, we're not going to get the same level of kind of chaos and side by side that we see in Austria. But I do love Austria. I hope it stays on the calendar for a long time to come. Or Styria.
Yeah, Styria, Austria, Osteria, whichever it was. I think if we can take positives from what's happened this year globally, it's that we are going to see tracks like, Austria kicking off the season. We're going to Mugello in September. I think it's great, and there's still talk that we could be in Portimao, Hockenheim, and Imola in October. I'm looking forward to Hockenheim in October. That could be brilliant. Hockenheim in July was wet. It's going to be fantastic. So seeing these old school tracks being brought back to the calendar, because, of course, Portimao would be a new one, wouldn't it? But coming back to the calendar because they need them in Europe, I love that, because it's a whole new challenge. I think the Tilke tracks are too sanitized now, all these massive concrete runoffs. I know safety and all of that, but look at the incident between Albon and Hamilton, and then again today between Albon and Perez, and all those other things at turn 4. A move around the outside of turn 3 in Russia is spectacular. A move around the outside of corners in Bahrain is brilliant, but you've often got a massive tarmac runoff, so if you get it wrong, you just go across there and it's fine. Whereas in Austria, that move around the outside of turn 4 is so much more spectacular and means so much more, because if you screw it up, you're in the gravel and your race is over. And that is what I love, and I can't wait. Oh, I'm getting all giddy now. I can't wait to go to places like Mugello and Portimao if it happens, and these classic tracks. And yeah, let's give it an old school feel this season. Come on.
I do agree with you. I do think having this kind of weird season is a good place to experiment with stuff like that. I get wary of like being too old school for the sake of it, sense, because I know sometimes people can get stuck in the old ways and not appreciate some of the new things. But Tilke tracks seem like they were designed in a lab to kind of go racing on, whereas like the older tracks feel like they've just been carved out of the earth. If you know what I mean. There's just this kind of like, you're just using the geography around you, and some of them are unsuitable completely. I spent a long time saying, I don't know if Mugello would be very good for racing in modern day Formula One. On the other hand, it's a bonkers track with like the curves with all kinds of weird camber and elevation changes and high speed chaos. And I think it's going to be really exciting to watch them, even if, I don't know, maybe the race proves difficult to overtake. But seeing modern day Formula One cars racing around that is going to be super exciting. And just having the opportunity to do different tracks this year is very fun. I know a lot of people were saying, like Paul Ricard, actually, Mugello doesn't have the infrastructure to support like the transport to get fans in and out. So this is the perfect year to try something like that.
Yeah, Tom97, who does my hot laps for previews, he did a hot lap of Mugello. And I know it's only on a game. It looks fantastic. It looks absolutely fantastic. And what I would say on sort of the overtaking thing, you look at it and you do go, that's going to be tough. But number one, watching the cars around there will be epic. And number two, like Tom Bellingham said of WTF1 fame, he said there was a point when Austria was coming back to the calendar where everyone said Austria wouldn't suit the modern day cars, and we've just come off the back of 2 very good races. So
absolutely fair. You gotta try it before you criticize it. Try it before you knock it. Don't knock it till you tried it. That's the phrase I'm going for. Yeah, I'm excited to see. I'm kind of up for anything this season, to be honest. Whoever wants to host an F1 race, let's go for it. Let's just try it. I still think Imola will be a bit rubbish, but I think just watching the cars try and do it will be a lot of fun.
Imola's a nostalgia thing for me. That's all that is. It's Anyway, there was a race today. Let's get back onto that one. Driver
Oh,
of the
yeah.
day. Chat, one surname. Who's your driver of the day? I will read a few out. I'm going to go reverse alphabetical order today.
All right.
So, Stuart, who's your driver of the day?
I was thinking about this. I am going to go Perez because I think he was solid from start to finish. I know he lost a bit of his wing, which curtailed him a little bit, and I'm not really putting the blame at his doors too much for that. But he drove a great race, and it was really exciting watching him. I do want to point out though the last two races, like Norris has saved his blockbuster laps till way after people have started voting. So I do feel he probably would have got a greater share of the official vote in both times. But yeah, I just loved watching Perez today. I really loved it.
Kind of a bit like Bottas last week for me. Obviously, different circumstances. I find it very difficult not to say Lewis Hamilton because it was a dominant performance. He just disappeared. But it's also very hard not to look at Perez and go, yes, that car's quick, but he did start well out of position. And, could have been P4, probably should have been P5, but obviously ended up P6 after that contact. So I think Perez is a good shout, but that's not to take anything away from Lewis. I think his drive today was exceptional. The reason maybe I think Bottas's drive might have been a bit better last week because he had more to contend with, didn't he, with all the safety cars and things like that and a bit more pressure from his teammate. But Hamilton, Perez. I'll go Perez. I mean, a lot of chats, I'll go Hamilton. You lot are saying Perez, so I'll go Hamilton just to mix it up a little bit. I will super quickly say, I don't know if they're in chat, and I don't know if they're listening to this afterwards, but there's somebody who often pops up in the comments or chat when I forget to mention it, asking about fastest lap. That went to Carlos Sainz.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got Norris has got the first fastest lap of the season last week, and Sainz this week. So McLaren, very good at sticking the softs on and going for a super hot lap towards the end. I was really surprised, actually, that Verstappen didn't get that. I thought he was going to take that with that stop at the end. So,
yeah, they all definitely wanted it, didn't they?
Yeah.
And Hamilton as well was. I don't think he went for it right to the end. It's unclear, but he definitely seemed to be wanting to get that extra point for quite a few laps. And maybe when he knew that there were cars on the softs, he thought not to push the car too hard. But yeah, double fastest laps for McLaren, 2 races in a row. Again, a couple of years ago, who'd have thought?
I was going to say something that's gone out of my head. It's gone. It'll come back. Never mind. Miguel says Perez. Mario says Perez. Tyler says Hamilton. And Samuel says Checo, driver of the day. Norris for Tanya. I think Norris deserves a nod, definitely. V Lily says Lando. Scroll down a bit further. Kieran, Perez. Edouard says Perez. Adam says Norris. Just trying to find some different ones in here. Sunita says Checo as well. Raul says Perez. Keegan says South Africa. I think that was on the other conversation. I'd like to see us back at Kyle Army. I really would. Thomas, it was my first race actually as a fan. So Thomas Norris. Rahul says Norris. Justin Perez. Checo for Mario. A lot of love for Perez as you would expect. Andrew saying Norris. A lot of Lando Norris fans in tonight. Oh dear. Nozza says Max. That's a name. Oh no, that's not that again. Leclerc says KL74. I think there's a tongue-in-cheek there somewhere, possibly. I think that's a point. Aisha says Hamilton, perfect weekend. It really was, wasn't it? Fantastic performance all weekend from him. So, yeah, difficult not to say him. Sam says Donkey. Cool. Michael says Norris. Kvyat for Red Bull Salva Petronas. I love chat. I love it. I really do. Corey says Hamilton. P17 to P6 for Checo. That's Miguel. So obviously sticking with that one. Hamilton. Perez. Lando. It says V Lily. I think I've said V Lilies already. Norris or Perez for Granny Annie or Annette. Hamilton. Yeah. Kimmy for Mr. Random Guy. I think Mr. Random Guy might have some bias there, if he's the same Mr. Random Guy from Twitter, but we'll see. A couple more for Hamilton. Yeah, very much as you'd expect, Perez, Hamilton, all getting a nod there. Is there anybody? I think Norris, again, deserves that nod, but I'm just trying to think. Ricciardo for his defensive driving possibly deserves a little bit of credit there for that, and I don't know. I think that's kind of everybody that you'd look at for driver of the day, isn't it?
Yeah. And, beyond that, I think what's great is we saw a lot of great driving today. a lot of skill, a lot of people putting in hot laps when they needed it, some good wheel-to-wheel racing. It's been pretty solid. And actually, I want to say the whole weekend we've seen some great driving. We had a very wet Saturday and a slightly mixed up grid today, and um, that sort of that spin from Verstappen yesterday aside, and the Leclerc misdemeanor. We haven't really seen too many horrendous mistakes, have we? It's been,
No.
especially yesterday, actually through qualifying. I thought it was incredible how wet it was and how well everyone was driving and not making too many mistakes. I was really impressed.
I'm going to do some questions. I've had a super chat from Black Hawk, so I will read that in a second. But I just want to say thank you to Neil L, Champ TV, Kevin, Mark, Ven, Matisse, Herglind Dave, Gopi, Stelios, TJ, Vincent. I'm not reading them all, don't worry. Esteban, Jack, Stephen, Nicholas, Steve, Ben. Yeah, for all subscribing during the stream. You can probably see where this is going. We're 479 subscribers away from 100k. My word, that's scary. So yes, if you are new, please do consider subscribing. Not begging for subs, as I was accused of yesterday. I've asked like 3 times in that way in 3 years. So yeah, please, if do consider subscribing if you're enjoying the content and want to hear some of our random ramblings about Formula One. Tons to come this season, and don't forget to drop a like on the stream as well. That'd be massively appreciated. Helps the channel out as well. It's just nice to see. A thumbs up for a good race too. So yes, let's do some super chats then I'll do the ones from chat. So Black Hawk says, do you think Ferrari and their customer team's performance so far this year is adding more fuel to the fire about what the engine was doing last year? Long story short, because I need a drink, Stuart. Yes, definitely adding more fuel to the fire.
Sorry,
I'm gonna
admit I missed half of what you said because I saw something from the chat from John T. But can you say that again? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, just asking about is more fuel being added to the fire because of the Ferrari customer team performance? Are people looking at that a bit more and going, something fishy was going on last year, basically?
Yes, and absolutely, definitely. I think this is something that's going to go on and on. To be honest, because the FIA dealt with it the way they did without sort of being transparent. So there's all this stuff hidden in a box that no one can see. And every time the Ferrari engines are showing themselves up, we come back to this question of how illegal were Ferrari last year. So yeah, definitely.
Granny Annie says, what are the chances of McLaren being in the top 3 at the end of the year? I think they've got a great chance. I know Racing Point probably top 3 at the moment, but I think the way they've started the season, that McLaren, if the season's long enough, will probably be more developed. I think they'll put more development on the car than Racing Point will if we've got a long season. So I think they've got a great chance if Ferrari don't get their act together of being top 3 this year. Great, 39 points on the board. What did they have this time last year? I'll have a quick look if my computer doesn't want to blow up because I dared to open another window. I do apologise. Quick scroll down. Quick maths. Oh, so this time last year, after 2 races, they had a 6th place finish, which is 8 points. So they're 31 points better than they were after 2 races last year. Very different track, of course. But yeah, I think they've got a chance.
Yeah, 100%. I'm very excited to see. I mean, to be honest, I'm excited to see this whole, as you described it, battle for 3rd place. Because they can still develop a little bit, and we're going to unknown tracks and all kinds of things. So yeah, 100%.
Sachin said, what do you guys think of the robot trophy presentation? It's someone who's a bit nerdy like me. It's a fantastic way around a problem. I think that's brilliant. Drivers looks a bit bemused. I think it's fair to say. I like that, Stuart. It's a bit cheesy, but it works.
It is. It kind of having a kind of a box operated by remote control kind of feels like old school Doctor Who, like 80s sci-fi, kind of very, very clunky special effects. But I quite liked it. I thought it was kind of cute watching the drivers sort of try and scoop it up as it goes past. Yeah, very silly, but very cool.
KVJ, thank you. Becoming the latest member of the F1 word. Thank you for that. I've written down member on my pad. And for the 15th time in 6 months, I will get round to doing something for members. I keep forgetting. So yes, I will try. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that one. Okay, that's a random conversation I'm not going to read out. We've answered the robot one. Any questions in chat, and we'll answer the couple before we disappear. Thoughts on F2, F3? The racing has been great so far. That's from Zach Edwards. I think F2 and F3 are always pretty brilliant, aren't they? Really, but I know you're really getting into the feeder series now, Stuart. I know it was at the start of last year. You were sort of like, I will watch them, and now you're probably more into them than I am. But I think F2 always brilliant. And so again, back to what you said a minute ago about Formula 1. Great driving yesterday by the F2 boys in some pretty rough conditions.
Yeah. This year I'm watching F1. I did a little bit of F3 last season, but I'm definitely doing last week. But yeah, definitely keep my eye on F2. I haven't quite fully got my. You know how it takes a little while to know which drivers are in which cars and what the story is. I'm still getting my head around that, but I'm. It's been fascinating to watch and seeing some real stories develop. And yesterday was, it was some really good racing. And again, I was expecting maybe a bit more chaos than there was, but there were all some excellent driving in testing conditions. And we could see some, real good quality drivers coming up into F1 sometime over the next few years. Your boy Schwartzman doing well. Well, one of the races.
Breaking news.
Mm-hmm.
Renault have launched a protest against Racing Point and the pink Mercedes. That's all we have at the moment. Oh, good Lord. Let's have a look. I'm just looking for an article here. I probably shouldn't read articles, but,
Oh, you talk, I guess. If this is about the Mercedes similarity, we have spoken a bit of wondering when that bubble would burst and people would launch into a protest. And I guess it's the point that they threaten Renault potential position in the championship.
I'll do this fairly. I am reading directly from an article. It's at motorsport.com. I will link it. I will pin it as a comment down below for anybody watching afterwards, but I just want to make sure that I give full credit before I read this out because I don't want to get into trouble. Renault has protested Racing Point's cars following its double points finish in the Austrian Grand Prix. The complaints have been lodged about both Sergio Perez and Lance Stroll. The allegation is that Racing Point have breached the rules by not using a design that had been fully created by itself.
There you go.
The one they've put forward, a competitor shall, in respect of the listed parts to be used in its cars in Formula 1, only use listed parts which are designed by it. Renault further cited that Racing Point had not retained the exclusive right to use the listed parts in Formula 1 so long as it competes in Formula 1. So basically, they're not very happy, but they'll have a look at it, the stewards, I'm sure, and the FIA will get involved and all of that business. But I don't see this going anywhere, Stuart, because the FIA have already, apparently, according to Racing Point, been in there, overlaid all the blueprints and plans and said, no, it's fine. So if it's already been declared legal, this is a bit like the DAS situation, isn't it? This is Renault trying to get the stewards to say it's illegal and then take it to the FIA, because the FIA will say it's fine, but the race stewards might have a different interpretation of the rules.
Yes. Yeah, and the race, it's kind of weird the way it works, where the FIA is sort of by itself is kind of offers sort of guidance, whereas the stewards have the final say about the cars that enter the races, which I guess is kind of the reason that Renault have waited to do this, although I don't know why they didn't do it last race, to be honest. But, that car's been on display for 4 months now, and we thought this was all done and dusted. As far as I understand it, that Racing Point is a copy of a lot of the Mercedes, but only in the sense that they have looked at the car and made their own version of it. I don't think there's anything to suggest that they, nip round the back of the Mercedes HQ and swapped a few dollars for some secondhand parts. I don't think there's any suggestion of that. So I don't know the way this is going to go, other than having an official stewarding line on it. It'd be fascinating if it was deemed illegal, though. I don't know what would happen after that, but I don't really see it going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, Annette's just said in chat, of course they protested Racing Point are beating it, and that's exactly it, isn't it? I was just going to say, they've protested the Racing Point. No word about Haas, who, if you put last year's Ferrari and this year's Haas side by side, there's a hell of a lot of similarities. Not quite to the point that the Racing Point is a Racing Point, but the Haas takes a lot of inspiration from Ferrari in their design because they buy a lot of parts from Ferrari. So it's interesting that they've chosen to kick off about Racing Point and not Haas. Not necessarily this year, but last year and previous years. But yeah, bit of an odd one to wait so long. But I don't see this going anywhere because the FIA have been at the factory. Racing Point have given them all the information. They've checked it against Mercedes, and there are enough differences for it to be considered their own work. I don't see how this can go anywhere. That's legal. So I think this is just a case of trying to get the stewards to say it's illegal, so that Racing Point then protests, and it ends up in front of either the FIA directly or the Sporting Court of Moaning Appeals or whatever they call it. I think that's probably where we're looking at the moment, isn't it? I think that's probably what they're trying to do. But I expect a similar statement. Obviously, very different wording in there, but I think it's a similar statement to what we have for the DAS, in that it's fine, shut up. Basically.
Yeah, that's what I expect. And unless Renault have uncovered some information that we're not privy to yet, and this becomes some kind of scandal, yeah, that's all I imagine happening. And I really hope it doesn't come to that. I really hope there isn't something nefarious going on behind the scenes, other than Racing Point did a really good copying job. And look at the Mercedes. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Johnson's got my tinfoil hat on. He says, you know why? Because Racing Point protested the Renault braking system and won. It could, you know, F1 is that petty at times, isn't it? It could do, but yeah. I mean, I think Racing Point have been open from day one. They've said, I think it was Andy Green said something, I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, we looked at what we needed. We looked at Mercedes and we sat down and said quite openly to ourselves, they're doing a better job than us. What are they doing? Let's copy it. So this isn't something that I mean, you couldn't hide it away because it's so bloody obvious, but it's not something they've tried to shy away from. They've said, yeah, we've taken inspiration. A lot of that is copied and our interpretation of what they've done. So it's a bit salty. I think it's a bit salty and frustrated, and you know, Renault probably a bit like McLaren. You know, hang on, and Williams indeed. We build our own cars. This isn't fair. But at the same time, McLaren, Williams, Renault are all perfectly free to copy the Mercedes design as well. I hope they don't, because that's going to be potentially 10 very similar looking teams on the grid. But yeah, I don't see there being an issue with this one, but I'll keep an eye on that one. Make sure you follow me on social media. I'll update you as well. I don't know if there's a video tomorrow because I've not really decided on a format. If there is, I'll put something in there for an update. I might even do a short video anyway, just to cover that if there's any big news, but I don't expect this to get to anything other than shut up, really, which is probably what chat are thinking now. Shut up, Sean, for God's sake, I've had enough of you now. But yeah, oh, well, there you go, bit of drama. I promised a couple of questions, so I will do it. We are nearly at 100k subs, Nicholas. I'm probably going to pass out when it happens and do a little dance afterwards, and maybe I'll get cake anyway. Who knows? I'm going to show about cake.
Yeah.
I really want cake now. I don't want to. Yeah, I had an argument with my other half yesterday about Jaffa cakes and whether a cake or a biscuit. So let's.
That was settled in court. That went before the Court of Appeal. The FIA ruled on that. Cake one. It's a cake, so I don't know where you stood on that.
But they make them in Biscuit Week on Bake Off.
All right, very quickly, the difference between a cake and a biscuit is biscuits go soft when they go off, cakes go hard. It's legally a cake. Hello? Let's not get into arguments of soft. Yeah, welcome to the F1 word, where we discuss Jaffa cakes and the structure of biscuits and cake when they've gone off. Fantastic stuff. Well, I have them with a cup of tea, so I have cake with tea. Oh, whatever. Anyway, questions from chat. Now I've got them started on Jaffa cakes. If you're listening to this later, you're probably thinking, oh my God. New subscribers going, what have I done? Wouldn't Red Bull protest if Checo had beaten Albon, says Zane. Probably not. Because with the greatest of respect to Racing Point,
they're probably not going to be beating Red Bull this year massively, and Red Bull have got their eye on Das anyway, so I think they're busy. I think Red Bull are protesting enough.
Yeah.
I don't think they need any more. Don't give them ideas at all.
Yeah, if they're going to protest anyone, they're going to protest Mercedes. That's where their eyes are right now.
I'm trying to get back on track. Do you think Haas will leave at the end of the season? That's from Dash. I wouldn't blame them. I hope they don't. I have big hopes for Haas. I think they entered F1 in the perfect way. I think they did it the right way, a cost-effective way. I hope they don't. But if I were Gene Haas and I looked at, of course, it's only one racetrack. It's only 2 race weekends, so anything can happen between now and whenever the end of the season is. But if I were Gene Haas and I was sort of reevaluating my position in the sport, I'd look at last season and this season and go, is this really worth it? I think they will, to see how they get on next year with the regulations staying as they are. I think that will help them financially. But if I were Gene Haas, and I think he probably will as well, sit down and we'll have a really good think about their future, because they're not in a good place at the moment.
I think they're definitely unhappy. They've spoken words to that, and they definitely like keeping an open mind about their options. On the other hand, I think next year, obviously, we've got the cost cap coming in, and then after that, we've got sort of regulations coming in to kind of bring things a little bit closer to parity among the teams and stop the widening spread between the best and the worst. And I think to leave before you're sort of entering a period where you have the most opportunity to improve and really get in amongst it, I think might be erroneous. I want them to stay. I'd like them to stay. I have no particular strong feelings about Haas because I don't think they've really demonstrated a personality in the way that some teams have. But I don't want to be like less than 10 teams. I want more teams. And I think I don't think we want a story of someone coming into F1 guns blazing and then being like, oh, this is rubbish, and then leaving again. I don't think that's a good story.
I hope we don't lose them. I really do. I was just sorry, I'm on Twitter keeping an eye on the reaction. Luke Smith, if you're not following him on Twitter, you should be. He gets you a lot of information. Just tweeted out that it's worth mentioning that last week McLaren said there were no grounds for a protest. So Renault have obviously found something they're not happy with. Like you said, Stuart, we'll get more information soon. There might be something they found that they deem illegal, so we'll see. But again, I don't think anything will come of that at all. Then again, often wrong on everything, so it's okay. One more question then, and then we're going to call it a day, because I'm getting hot and we've been going for nearly an hour and a half, which is my absolute limit for live streams. Yeah, that never happens, does it? One more.
Never.
I'll have a scroll quickly. I've seen one I can use if we haven't got one about the race. I'll tell you what, actually, no. I'll take Ari or Ari's question, but I'm just going to twist it a little bit. Just saying, do you think Alonso will buy the Renault team in a few years? It's an interesting one, but I think the question I'm going to throw to you, Stuart, is thoughts on Alonso's return. Are you happy? I'm very conflicted. I'll repeat what I said the other day. I got some stick for it, but I think that I personally would have liked to have seen a Guan Yu Zhou get an opportunity. But if I were in Renault's position, looking at what they need and what I would need as team principal for that car, Alonso makes perfect sense. And it's probably, for them, the right decision. I'm not convinced it's the right move for him, apart from the fact he seems pretty keen to get back in Formula One. But all I'm saying is I would have liked to have seen the old guard who have left F1 sort of stay away. Sounds awful, doesn't it? Like, get out. I don't want you here. But give that someone like Guan Yu Zhou an opportunity. But again, if I were Cyril Abiteboul, you need experience. You need someone who's quick. You need someone who knows the team. Alonso ticks all of those boxes and a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, I too are conflicted with this, because part of me is like, Alonso, he's a great talent. I've been very excited watching him gallivanting around the world, trying all kinds of different motorsports out and doing very well. And I think it's quite exciting to have him back, especially if he has a you know a good return. And not everyone has had a good return to Formula One, even if they do have championships in their pocket. On the other hand, I agree with you. There is a long queue of young drivers looking for seats that are becoming quite spare. There are not a lot of seats in Formula One going around, and we do need to kind of get the churn going, get the old people out, get the new people in at some point. Although Joe, of course, doesn't have guaranteed super license points on the table yet for Renault. And on the other hand, he's, I hate to say it, he's a little bit toxic. And if that Renault is kind of doing what it's doing now, is he going to be that thrilled about it? Is he going to be able to help push the team forward, or is he going to moan about it and sort of bring the team's morale down the way he kind of did with McLaren and Honda, which if you speak to anyone on the inside of that did not go well for anyone. And do we need that Alonso back? I'd like him in a position where he's happy and he's doing well and he's a positive force, but he's that's not a guarantee. And I get a bit tired of grumpy, angry, complaining Alonso, if I'm quite honest with you.
I think somebody said to me the other day that the toxicity is just a rumor. It's not just a rumor. That's been people that have worked with him have confirmed that. But if you're Fernando Alonso and you're a driver of that talent and your team isn't delivering a car, you're going to kick off, aren't you? You're not going to be happy. So I think we can sort of sympathise with him there. But I think a couple of years away, just listening to his interview with, I think it was either F1 or Sky or something like that, listen to his interview, he seems a bit more like the pre-McLaren Alonso. That's how he feels to me, sort of someone who's the McLaren Honda Alonso, a little bit more relaxed. He wants to go racing. He's looking forward to going racing. I think this is why I hate doing just random tangent. Why I hate doing reactionary news videos, because you don't have all the information. And if I'd have waited a couple of days, I could have said all this in that. But I think that I think Alonso will be fine. I don't think we're going to see that toxic Alonso because he's been away for a couple of years. And as I said it in the video, I think he's probably looked at it and gone, Formula One's rubbish, and then gone away for 2 years and then gone, do you know, I really love that sport. I want to go back. And I think he's hungry. And I think we will get I don't know which is the real Alonso, but the less toxic Alonso. Don't get me wrong, if Renault were not delivering, he'll say, but he's what's the word I'm looking for, the phrase? He's sort of talking the talk. He's giving it I'm coming back because I've missed F1. I want to go racing. I'm looking forward to it. I'm back where my heart is. He called Renault his romantic choice. Each to their own. Yeah. Oi. But yeah, and all of that kind of business, and talk about 2022. And I think he is very much there for the team as well as himself. So I'm hoping we get the proper Alonso, the Alonso we had that maybe wasn't quite so catty. But again, understandable. Honda were terrible in that McLaren, and Ferrari, it didn't work there. So I can understand his frustration. But I'm a bit more optimistic than I was on Wednesday. Is probably the best way to put it. And also, we want the best in F1, and he is one of the best drivers in the world.
That is true. And I do, if he comes back and he's a good, fun to watch, has the kind of scraps that, we see in the midfield, assuming the car's in the midfield, but that we saw today, and he enjoys it, that would be great. I would love that.
Him and Ocon's going to be fun next year. That partnership is going to be brilliant. You've got Ocon, who's not afraid to get his elbows out against a teammate, and you've got Alonso, who won't take any nonsense. What did Martin Brundle say in commentary? I think Alonso would have had Ocon on his roof in that race today.
Yeah, that's going to be quite something, isn't it?
Looking forward to it.
Very much.
But yeah, I think we'll leave it there because I just don't want to go on about Alonso. Yeah. Conflicted, intrigued, and a little bit excited because I think it will be great to see another. And also, if Raikkonen retires and Vettel leaves, we'd only have Hamilton as a world champion at the moment. Obviously, Bottas could win the title, but yeah. So, we need another world champion, really, don't we? So Alonso back could help us out there. But yeah, we'll leave it there, Stuart, because we've already gone over an hour and a half. I'm good at this. But thank you very much for coming along. It was good fun to chat about Formula One as always, and I think Although Mercedes looked pretty dominant, I actually think in the case of the Drivers' Championship, Hamilton versus Bottas and everything going on behind, I think we've had a very good start to the season, and it's kind of set us up very nicely for an epic next few races.
Couldn't agree more. I'm excited. I haven't run out of steam yet. I know it's like non-stop from here on out, but yeah, thrilled.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, we'll leave it there. But thank you very much, Stuart, and I'm sure I'll talk to you again shortly. Shortly? That were a bit northern.
On that note, cheers. I'll speak to you later.
Yeah, speak to you later. Thank you very much to Stuart. Apologies for my northernness there. Anyway, yes, that is it for this stream. Thank you for coming along. It is a bit longer there, but obviously that breaking news from Renault and Racing Point came in, so wanted to cover that super quickly. But yes, I might be back tomorrow. I know you like your Monday video after the race weekend, but we'll just see if I come up with a format that works, or if I come up with something decent. I'll record something. If it's terrible, you won't get it. If it's good, then I'll put it out. But yeah, other than that, make sure you follow me over on social media. Links to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and all of that jazz in the description down below. Don't forget to drop a like as well, chat, before you disappear. That'd be massively appreciated. And I'm hoping you might get a 100k video this week. That'd be pretty awesome. But I'm not going to bang on about subscribers. I'm going to disappear. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you again in the next one. Bye-bye.